So, welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Thanks for experimenting with us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us in the world. I'm Sharon Billings. I am the head of training here at Talentism. I'm calling from Boston today, and my colleague Jake is joining us from just outside of Amsterdam. So it's much later there. And then we also have our producer, Alex Hunter, is on behind the scenes from the Bay Area. So we're pretty well represented across geographies. I want to let you know why we're doing this. And we've been helping our clients navigate confusion in a couple of different ways. So Jake is one of the roles that Jake plays. He is our senior executive coach. He is head of global expansion. He is also the primary writer of our weekly newsletter, The Sense Maker. And the past 5 weeks, I think at least the past 5 weeks, have been on this subject from one way or another. And our clients are finding really a lot of value in what they're getting there. And so we're being invited to go in and talking to their staff, talking to managers, talking to more and more like all hands meetings to help try to navigate the confusion and try to bring clarity to that. So because people were finding value in it, we really wanted to bring this to the widest audience that we possibly could. So we're experimenting and doing this with you here today. And depending on how it goes, depending on if you're finding it's helpful, we will potentially be doing more of these. We've actually already started conversations with one of our clients. We're going to be partnering with them to do a 2-part webinar series that's really focused on the folks that are finding themselves displaced in all of this. So using our clarity framework, the Big Four, and how do you use this as an opportunity for the next step to really unleash your potential. So there's different ways we're trying to be helpful in these incredibly difficult circumstances. So a couple of housekeeping things. You will see at the bottom of your screen, everyone's been chatting in, which has been terrific. So the way we're going to use the chat function today is if you are having technical difficulties of any kind or a question regarding, logistics or administration, chat in and Alex will be responding to you. We will be answering questions, but we're going to be doing that through writing, and I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A function. So that's where you're going to type in your questions. We'll leave at least 20 minutes at the end of our session for those questions. So I will put those in. I will feed those to Jake. So everyone's on mute. So this is odd for me because I'm used to having like conversations. So it's going to be one way that way, but you guys will be able to communicate with us through Q&A. So, and with that, Jake, if you could go to the next slide, I just want to give everyone a little bit of grounding in terms of what Talentism is all about. If you don't have experience with us, I know there are folks on the call who have not been engaged with us before, and that's terrific. One of the things that's really important to know is that Talentism is in the business of confusion. So what that means is confusion as we define it is any time where our reality does not match our expectations. And that happens to everybody professionally and personally every single day. Something happens and it just was not what you expected. It's not what you thought was supposed to happen. It's not what you think should have happened. So that in and of itself is normal, but it's how we address it, how we react to that makes the difference. Do we thrive or do we fail? And so we start with the reality that confusion exists. Confusion is real. And we are looking at how do we make sense of that? How do we take productive action? And how do we not only say that confusion is real, but actually leverage it for great learning and growth? So it's an opportunity. And for the clients we work with, they're high growth, fast paced, innovators. Things are changing all the time. It's a complex environment and there's lots of confusion. So the more you can leverage that, the better off you are. So thinking about current context, and I don't think we've ever experienced more confusion than we're all experiencing with the pandemic crisis. So then I think about that, and I think about, I have Jeff Hunter, our CEO, his voice in my head all the time saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so thinking, yes, I want to, be the best person I can be, and see this as an opportunity for learning and growth. I want to rise to the occasion. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to come out of this the other end and really feel like we've accomplished something. So that's part of the reality. But the other part of the reality is I am overwhelmed. I am scared of the unknowns, and I'm tired with the barrage of all the news that's coming every day. And just when I feel like I've got my grounding, something else is coming at me. So I suspect that a lot of us are feeling that way. So that's reality. What do we do about that? So that's why we're here today. So our goals for what we want to accomplish today, we want to create clarity. We want you to be able to create clarity for yourself and others in the face of fast moving hyper confusion, so that you can take practical, productive action now and throughout the evolution. So it's not just what you can do now, but as things change, that you have some ways to think about it. How do I make sense about this? How do I take action? So that's what we want to accomplish. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jake.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Sharon, for queuing us up with that. So let's just take a moment to set the stage on what it is that we're facing here. Sharon talked about the definition of confusion that we use being this gap between reality and expectations. And this is perhaps the most confusing environment that I think any of us have had to face in our lifetimes. So I see four particular trends or dynamics that make this so particularly confusing. One, there's rapid overlapping context shifts. So, it's confusing enough when you walk into work and, you have a new person or you're asked to do a new thing. Here, suddenly people are being asked to work from home for the first time. They're being asked to use technology in a new way. They're watching coworkers losing their jobs. Suddenly the whole focus of what they're working on may be changing dramatically in response to market context. Businesses that have been focused on, hey, let's burn cash and go for growth, suddenly are facing cash constraints. So there are context shifts all over the place on the personal side. Going to the gym, going to that yoga class that we love, meeting our friends for that glass of wine after work, all of these places that we go to resource ourselves, to make sense of things, to do our work well, to live our family lives well. These are all rapidly changing all at the same time. That in and of itself is a recipe for massive confusion. You add to this painful, escalating surprises. So I imagine every single person on this webinar is facing surprise losses of some kind. It may be weddings being canceled. It could be trips that you were excited about that are not happening. It could be losing your job. It could be losing people that you love. So what we're seeing is loss all over the place, from the small to the large, and it just keeps rolling, right? Each week that goes by, each day that goes by, I know at least for me, feels like a month. And it's like every single day, it's like, oh God, what is it going to be now? So we have context is shifting rapidly. Every day is bringing new losses, new surprises. And on top of that, we're under constant ambiguous threat. So you think about, the best horror movies and thrillers and things like that, and what they do so well to get us into a state of nervous system activation is they always have the big scary thing just lurking off screen, right? It's that thing that's in the basement, it's the dark corner, it's that threat that's always lurking in the background. And the reality is that that's what we're dealing with right now, that suddenly just the act of going to the grocery store is scary. We don't know when we're going to lose our jobs. We don't know when we're going to get sick. We don't know when, we might lose loved ones or be facing things that we've never had to face before. And that threat, it's not a singular event, because most of us are pretty good at going into emergency mode to deal with acute threats, but it's a constant lingering threat that's ambiguous. It's hard to make sense of. And then finally, to compound all of those three things, there's an uncertain impact and timeline. It's sort of fascinating to me when I talk to people who are like, well, I'm looking forward to when June comes and I can go back to normal. And I have to admit that that gets me scratching my head because I'm like, what do you expect to happen between now and June? We have no idea, is the truth. And I make no claims to being an expert in terms of epidemiology or anything like that. But the best people that I'm talking to around this to make sense of it on that side of things are talking 6 months optimistically, a year, year and a half, 2 years, who knows, right? And because we're living in such a complex system, it's also hard to know how the impact is going to roll out. Does this start to affect supply lines? Does this start to affect food sources? Does this start to affect our social fabric in ways that are unanticipated? So you add up all of these factors that the context of how we live our day-to-day lives, how we produce value together, how we make sense of things is rapidly shifting with painful surprises that seem to be escalating day by day under a state of constant ambiguous threat with an uncertain impact and timeline. And that is maybe the most stunning combination, cocktail of threat triggers and confusion triggers that I think any of us have seen in our lifetime up until this point. So I lay all of that out because this is hooking into the basic way that our brains are wired. So going back to that definition of confusion as the gap between reality and expectations, we are facing it through those 4 factors writ large. And what happens from a neurobiological standpoint when that hits is that's usually when our survival mechanisms kick in. So something doesn't match our expectations, and there's a whole series of biological shifts that happen that have us essentially go into fight, flight, freeze mode. We are just immediately focused on survival. And this is pretty much automatic and unconscious. What do I have to do to get out of this situation? What do I have to do to survive? That's going down this path to certainty. And it's automatic, it's biological, and no matter how much we convince ourselves that we're thinking rationally, we aren't, because we've been hijacked for the purposes of making sure that we're safe. And the whole aperture of what we can even conceive of, what we can even reason through, shrinks down to that single point of how do I protect myself in this moment? When that kind of protection goes on for a long period of time, we need to start adjusting our mental models to make narratives around it. So that's that place where we start to get really certain about what's going on. And that's where we start looking for who's the bad guy in all of this. Okay, if I'm a leader or manager, this is the point where I start saying, okay, I can't trust my workers. I can't trust that if they're at home, they're going to still be working and not blowing things off. If I'm a worker, I'm maybe not trusting my CEO. Okay, he's a greedy jerk and doesn't care about me. This is that place where when we're under sustained threat and focused on protecting ourselves, we just want to make sense of it. And the fastest, easiest way that we usually can make sense of it is creating narratives about who's bad, who's stupid, who's lazy. And it's easier at least to have one clear enemy than to actually have to sit with the reality that we are in an uncertain, ambiguous environment that we are unprepared for. So I know that that's a dark picture. At the same time, there's an alternative, which is the path to clarity. So the beautiful and sort of tricky thing about confusion is it is also the root cause of learning. In the same way that it could be the root cause of fragility, when we're able to get above that immediate threat reaction and recognize that it's happening, that's the actual edge where we're faced with new things. And being faced with new things that demand our attention is the way that we actually learn and uncover opportunities. And the way that we start going down that path to clarity is having awareness of the situation, awareness of ourselves, awareness of the reactions that we're having in this moment, and then starting to move to clarity, which, to be clear, clarity is not, I know everything and I know exactly what to do. Clarity is, okay, there's a lot I don't know, and I know what is essential, I know what's important to me, and I'm willing to start moving forward despite everything that is at risk. And that place of clarity where you can begin putting productive experiments into place, where you can begin looking for opportunities, where you are in sync with the people around you on how you're going to move forward, That's the way that people can succeed and learn both in their personal lives and as organizations. So what I'm about to go into from here is, how do you actually do this as a leader or manager? How are you going to create, given the confusion around you, how are you going to ensure that rather than your people going down that path to certainty, which is going to make fragility throughout your organization, how are you going to convert this into a moment of learning and opportunity for the people around you? The first step is you got to get your own house in order. So this is that place where you got to go in and do some internal sense making, which starts with seeing and accepting reality. The reality is all of the things that I just mentioned. It is that uncertainty. It is that threat. It is that ambiguity. And there's this interesting thing that I see with clients and in the broader world, where most of us under threat like to think of things as binaries, right? We like to either deny what's happening and pretend that, we'll be back to business as usual and nothing's going to change, or it's Armageddon and, whatever, just stock up on guns and head for the hills. And it's very hard for people to go in the middle, that, yep, this is hard, there's a lot uncertain, we don't know what's going to happen, and this is the reality on the ground, and I'm sad, and I'm exhausted, and my people are confused, and the market is changing faster than I know what to do with. All of those things are true, and to see them and accept them at an actual embodied emotional level is the first step that you can take to creating clarity. The next part is going to building around the unknowns. So going back to common blind spots, many people, I'd say almost all people, get stuck in the trap that if they think that there are too many unknowns, that they can't do anything, that not knowing something means not knowing anything. And that's almost never the case. There's almost always something that you can do with the information that you have available, with the things that you can at least be relatively confident about in this moment, and you can start using the unknowns as just inputs into your model. Okay, I don't know what our cash position is going to be. I don't know what the marketplace is going to look like. I don't know how long this is going to last, but I do know that we have to deliver on our essential value proposition. And I do know what is essential to do that. And I do know that we need to be extra clear in this moment about how we're going to work together to get through this and what we are going to stand for. And that is something that I'm going to start delivering clearly now. The next piece is looking for opportunities. So going back to that notion of whether you're going down the path to certainty or the path to clarity, there's a shrinking of our apertures in these moments where, again, the natural impulse in the face of this kind of ambiguous threat is to just hunker down, just focus on one day at a time. Let's just get through this. I'll be honest, I'm no different than everyone else. I'm there most of the time, right? I'm just trying to make it through. At the same time, these moments where suddenly the whole sort of board gets shaken up, these are the big opportunities. I mean, most of the world's greatest companies were started in major recessions or depressions or downturns. General Motors, General Electric, IBM, I could keep going on, but most of the companies that we think of as the giants of today grew out of the ruins of something else, of some prior order. So this is the moment where the rules of the game as we knew them are loosening. And the people who are going to be able to see those opportunities and jump on them are going to be the ones who are going to win. Finally, when you've seen and accepted that reality, when you're recognizing that there's a lot you don't know, but there's also a lot that you do and you can act on it, when you're looking for those opportunities in the midst of all of this, now you can start creating clarity for others and helping them get on board with you. And every single one of you who becomes a creator of clarity for others is going to help create sustainability and opportunity both across your organization and society as a whole. Every single one of you can be a light in the dark because everyone around you is going to be struggling. Each of us as individuals is going to be struggling. And the best thing that we can do right now as leaders, managers, individuals is being that force of clarity in the world. Being the ones to help others see that they're confused, in pain, and there is something beautiful here if we're willing to grab it. So let's talk a little bit about how you can actually do that, how you can create clarity for others in this moment. So all of it has to start with your why, with your big vision. Companies that have a compelling why, companies that are clear why they exist, are going to be the ones who will win. Because again, every single day, your people are going to be dealing with so many threats, so many draws on their attention, that there has to be a compelling reason for them to go to work beyond, I just want to keep collecting a paycheck. Because the truth is that while that might be enough to drive someone to work from fear for a little while, it's not going to be a sustainable fuel for the long term, and it's not going to help them expand their aperture to see what's possible. So the only way you can start converting people to that clarity is being extra clear on what is genuinely essential. Why does your organization exist? Why does it need to exist? I have one client who I think is doing a beautiful job of this. They deliver technology that makes digital ordering very easy for schools and hospitals and things like that. And they're going through a really rough time economically. And their leader has done a tremendous job of stepping up and saying, we exist in this world because we are building the technology to make sure that children don't go hungry. We are building the technology to make sure that school children are getting the food that they need to get through their days. So they've launched all of these programs, giving away their technology for free to different school districts and helping them coordinate the delivery of food to kids, even when they're not at school. And it's funny because I had seen this company having various kinds of internal struggles before, and suddenly all of those have evaporated. Because in the midst of everything going on, with that hyper clear why, people are like, yeah, you know what, this is worth it. It's worth it for me to pay attention to this when I've got a 2-year-old screaming in the other room and I don't know, what my food supplies look like. The next piece is you have to communicate to people why this is going to be our finest hour. People want to show up. This is something that I've seen over and over and over and over again. People want to live meaningful lives. People want to do purposeful work. There's so much research on this that most people have an intrinsic drive to deliver things, to do things that actually matter, that they can look back on and say, you know what, when things were hard, I showed up to the best of my ability and I delivered something that mattered. And this is that moment. This is that moment where when everything seems to be going crazy and people just want to go home and open the bottle of wine and sit on the couch and stare at the wall for a while, this is the moment to say, okay, and there's something else. This is the moment that we can actually come together and come out better on the other side, that we can be better people and a better company through this, because these are the moments that we were made for. And the leaders who are communicating that clearly and authentically to their people are the ones who are going to win coming out of this. Finally, you have to be able to connect that big why, that big reason for existing for your company, to the personal why for each of your people. So people are different. People have different sources of meaning, different reasons to come to work. And it's not going to be the same for everyone. Not everyone is going to be bought into the vision for your company, whatever it is. So part of this is also going to be knowing your people well enough to be able to connect what matters to you, that big picture vision for the company, to what matters to them. So some will just want to be secure. What matters most to them will be just knowing that they can feed their family through this event. And in that case, it's going to be about helping them see that by showing up, by doing well, by delivering on value, by finding the opportunities in the midst of this, that's how you're going to be able to maintain cash flow and help people keep their jobs. Some people want to be the winners, right? Some people want to dominate the market. This is the time to share with them, hey, this is where we're sorting the wheat from the chaff out here. Our competitors, they may not be able to handle this as well as us. And if we are the ones who are able to do this better than anyone else, we're going to come out of this grabbing market share that we never thought was possible. And this might be the financial event of your life, right? The people who want the big gold star, who want the big golden cup, you can connect them to that. Other people want to be creative. Hey, this is a chance to rewrite the rules. This is a chance to do something new and find solutions that might not have seemed possible before. So whatever it is that lights people up, whatever people find that sort of personal meaning in, helping them connect that to the big reason why your company exists is the critical first step to reorienting people from that threat, from that perspective of threat to the perspective of, okay, what's possible here? What can we do together? The next step is you have to actually connect that why to the what. You have to be able to take your vision and convert it into meaningful work. And this is the role of management. We talk all the time at Talentism about management is essentially the discipline of achieving goals through the work of others. So this is that time where you have to take that big picture vision and help people understand what they need to do personally to actually deliver against it. So a big part of it is just going to be designing for the essential, right? It is hard, cash is tight, things are changing fast. What is most essential to be delivering on to ensure that your company and organization survives and delivers on its vision? So you have to be able to make sure that whatever people are doing is connected to that most essential piece. So if someone is in client service, this is the moment to understand their clients, right? This is that moment where people are suffering, and if you can actually understand what your clients' needs are better than anyone else, that's how you're going to succeed, and that's what's going to land the vision. So making it very clear that more than ever, someone in a client-facing position needs to be on their listening tour, right? Whatever it may be. With the transition to remote work for many companies, this is the time that you have to double, triple down on staying in sync. There's so many signals that we get from each other and so many ways that we can be sloppy when we're in the office together that just aren't going to fly in this time, particularly with how many things are changing. So these are those moments where you can't take the obvious for granted, where you want to be doubling down on your one-on-ones, on your email exchanges, using these chances to connect with your people and make sure that you're actually on the same page about what needs to be done. So just a very basic framework that I've been working with a number of my clients on is making sure that they're checking in consistently with people. Are they clear on what their goals are right now? Are they clear on what's blocking them? What, if any, questions do they have? What needs to be unblocked? So consistently staying very close to your people such that you know what they're actually facing and are able to deal with their confusion as it's arising. Finally, you got to be really clear that this is a context shift. Peacetime rules are no longer in effect. We're in the wilderness here. And this is going to mean hard decisions. So if we're now suddenly lost in the woods, it means we got to get water before we get food. Water is the key limiting factor, right? So there are going to be triage calls. There are going to be things that are important to us that are going to have to go on the back burner to stabilize the situation. And it is critical to help people understand that so that they are not confused by the choices that you're making and can understand why things are the way that they are. It's extra critical as well, more than ever, that decision lines, responsibilities are extra clear. Because again, people have so much on their minds that if they don't know how this is supposed to work, if they don't know what good looks like, it can fall apart very quickly. So this is the time to be extra clear with people. You open a meeting, you open a one-on-one, hey, just a quick reminder, what I'm holding as your role is this, I'm holding decision-making works like this, the point of this meeting is X. Okay, now let's go into content. That extra beat to step back and make sure people understand how things work and what their role is critical now. It's critical always, but now in particular, people need that. Because the thing that most people want at the end of the day in this kind of a crisis, if they have a why that they connect to, the thing that they're going to be most desperate for is knowing what they personally can do that is a manageable, bite-sized chunk of work that they can do that's going to contribute to that ultimate outcome. The last piece of this is the how. It's our culture. It's the way that we are agreeing to work together. It's our expectations for what behaviors are going to be rewarded and discouraged amongst us. Most of the time at Talentism, we don't take a particularly normative approach to this. We say what's important is for you to at least just be clear about the culture that you have. In this particular case, I do believe that there are some cultural principles that are going to succeed over others. It's hard to turn the ship, but if there are seeds of this that you can be watering in the midst of this, I highly recommend that you do. So the key cultural principles that I see successful companies using right now is, one, getting extra clear with people that problems genuinely are opportunities. It's really hard to see, but if your customers are suffering, this is a chance to help them. This is a chance to be a trusted advisor in ways that you never could have been before. If your product set is suddenly up in the air, this is a chance to actually iterate quickly and discover things that you might have never seen before. Every single problem that people face is an opportunity to do something different and better than they ever did before. And creating that as a cultural principle, so you have every single person in your organization using whatever extra capacity they have to look for the places that they can be doing something creative, surfacing the opportunities as they come up, that's how you're going to win. Because the reality is plans are mostly out the window. The environment is changing fast, it's uncertain, it's volatile, and the companies that are going to win are going to be the ones that are going to uncover those opportunities rapidly. And that requires a culture that sees them as such. The next piece is recognizing that compassion is advantage. So going all the way back to the confusion model, people are going to be having a rough time. People are going to be under threat. They're going to want to snap at each other. Some people are going to be frozen. Suddenly your best performer might not be answering emails. And it is going to be so easy to go to that place of like, they just don't care. Or, oh God, like this is the moment that I need them and they're not here. And it's going to be so easy to go to that place of blaming each other, of thinking the worst of each other, lashing out, etc. And this is the place where it is mission critical to get compassionate, to get curious, to recognize that if someone is acting in a way that doesn't make sense to you, that seems destructive or out of the norm, it probably means they're deeply confused and dealing with things that you may not have any idea about. So as a manager, as a leader, when you see those kinds of behaviors, resist the impulse to drop the hammer, because that's going to be the impulse. And what becomes critical in this situation is to uncover what is really going on with this person, because that's going to be your chance to turn this into productive action. Finally, you got to reward transparency, because the truth is, with things going this fast, there's going to be stuff breaking all over the place. People are going to be getting sick. People are going to have issues with their kids. People are going to just be confused and struggling with issues in the broader marketplace or their work. And if everyone is terrified that they're going to lose their job, the natural instinct is going to be to push all of that stuff under the carpet. And if you're a manager or a leader, you just can't afford that. You have to get ahead of problems. And the only way that you're going to successfully get ahead of problems is if you have every person in your organization understanding and believing that escalating those problems to you so you can see and get ahead of them is going to be rewarded. And of course, the critical part of that is making sure that you actually do reward it when they say it. And I'll tell you, just from the realistic side of it, that's going to be so hard because you already have so much on your plate. And it's going to feel like, like so-and-so is just dumping more on me. But what they're offering you is a gem. They're offering you a chance to get ahead of the problems that are going to compound in the dark if you don't find them now. So reward people for it, celebrate them for it, be excited that they brought you something, that they brought you this opportunity to get ahead of these problems before they compound. So putting it all together, this is something that is not a static process, but is actually a dynamic loop. So you start with that why. This is why we exist. This is what matters. This is what we're doing in the world. This is why we show up to work. This is why you should even bother paying attention to work with everything going on. You take that, you run it through your management machine, make sure that it is turning into ways to actually produce productive action, making sure people are clear on their responsibilities. They're going to be changing a lot, so making sure that your flight formations are extra clear and oriented towards what is essential at this moment to accomplish the mission, being clear that they will change likely over time and getting people ready for that so that you can divert resources to the opportunities that you're uncovering. and then driving that through a culture where you're supporting each other, holding compassion as an advantage, making it extra clear that problems are opportunities, and using that again to cycle back into that why, that we're uncovering the problems, that we're uncovering the opportunities, that every single day we are getting better in the face of something difficult to deliver on our big picture vision. All right, so I'm ready to take some questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Jake. You know, when I'm listening to you, it's just such a good reminder that these are the ways to operate through, you know, managing through clarity all the time. But then the more confusion that exists, it just becomes even more critical. So it's more important than ever to, you know, navigate and kind of get us the grounding to move from confusion to clarity. So a couple of questions coming in so far. So one question goes back to the why. And so talking about, you know, having a clear why and linking individual why to the organization's why. In the example that you used, it was you could link the company's why to what we're experiencing. And there was an opportunity specifically to what we're experiencing. But what if the company's why, you can't like, you can't find a link to like COVID-19 and the confusion of the pandemic. So how do you recommend someone navigate in that situation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And listen, like it's not always going to be a clear link. And I think it's less important to make the link than to be really clear about what the why actually is. So let's take an industry, for example, that is just devastated by us. Let's say the cruise industry, right? The cruise industry exists, right? If you're a good cruise, at least you want to give people a easy, all-inclusive, relaxed way to go with their families in an accessible way that they're going to be able to see the world together. You start with that why. You get really, really clear about it. And it's true. It may not be something that you can turn on right now. Now, I don't know if there are opportunities that come up if you're clear on that essential why to start creating virtual cruises, to start creating ways that you can, you know, are there ways to set up quarantine zone vacations and things like that, where you have people who have just been tested who can go on your cruises and things like that, because ultimately what you're delivering is safety to people and a safe way to see their world and be relaxed. Are there unique opportunities that you can discover there? There might be. There might not be. I'm not going to tell you that every business is going to survive this. A lot won't. But what I do know is that the businesses that are going to clean up are going to be the ones that are extra clear on what they're delivering and why it's worth to show up to work.
Yeah. So in the question, it asks for examples like a gym, a cafe, or an event company. And, you know, things like that, trying to find the why can be tricky right now.
Totally. Yeah. Again, rather than focusing on why it's tricky, just go back to the essentials. Go back to why you exist. If you're an event company, you know, you're here to foster connection, you're here to, whatever it is, cross-pollinate ideas. Use that essential basis rather than focusing on the venue to say, okay, so if we're an event company and we're an expert at bringing people together or organizing logistics for large groups of people, how much of that is transferable to the digital space? How much of that is transferable to, you know, can we actually be helping, say, with, you know, setting up some of these emergency hospitals if we're experts at how you set up logistics quickly? You know, if you know how to put together a bunch of tents and organize thousands of people to come in and out of something, can you be working with your local municipality to be delivering mobile testing? I have no idea. What I do know is that if you are dialed in to what is your essential reason to exist and your core competitive advantage in the world, there are going to be opportunities available if you're willing to see them.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Another question coming in. So you talked about clarifying decision lines and making sure those are clear in the what. What if they're not clear in your organization to begin with?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, welcome to the suck. Yeah, this is, you know, listen, I think it's Warren Buffett who says, you know, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming with their shorts off. We're here. Like whatever was a mess in your organization in the peacetime, that is going to be 10x as bad right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that
Um,
in and of itself can be an opportunity because it's like highlighting some problems that were already there.
Yes, that's exactly right. And this is a chance to, this is a chance to actually dial into what it's essential, because there is going to be all of that. Maybe if there was a lot of political posturing before that made it difficult to clarify those decision lines. We're in wartime, guys. This is wilderness rules. Like, you just got to designate someone, and you can just be honest about the context. Like, hey, up until now, I know it's been a struggle for us to be clear about who makes what calls. And right now, we got to cut through this and make some fast decisions. So and so is doing this, so and so is doing this, so and so is doing this. We're probably 80%, right, 20% wrong, but this is the best we've got right now. So you can acknowledge the context and use the opportunity and the fact that everyone is actually focused on the crisis at hand to start putting clarity into place that might not have even been possible before.
Right. Well, and it seems like the key goes back to the first point that you made is like to see and acknowledge reality. So if you're just ignoring that we don't have good communication channels, like then you don't have the opportunity if you're not even seeing that that is a problem.
Yes, that's exactly right. You got to start with that grounding in what's already here.
Another question here, Jake. Could you provide some context for how this might work as a middle manager with a large organization? So if you're not the person who gets to make all these decisions, you're in the middle of it. How do you use some of what you've offered here?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's actually largely the same. It's just going to be a smaller sphere of influence. So, again, that why, if you're not getting clear direction on that, you can at least start with your own personal why for what you see as possible within the business. You can at least start with the personal why for your team. If you're running a small, specific customer service organization, you can be dialed in at least to what you're trying to do there. So there's always levels that you can be operating at. I actually don't think that the context of being a CEO versus being a middle manager is so radically different when it applies to these steps.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong on this, or if this isn't answering this person's question, I'd be happy to expand.
That makes a lot of sense to me, Jake. And just the other thing, just in this specific context, I typed into chat, but this is being recorded. If after this you're like, oh man, more people need to be thinking this way in my organization, this will be available so you can share it more widely and maybe start having some other conversations that need to happen.
The one other thing actually that I think is that I wanted to hit on, and as far as that middle management thing, is this is the time for personal responsibility and taking responsibility for being a clarity maker within your organization. And so this might be the time where you're going to have to be helping drive clarity for your C-suite. That might be hard. There might be political dynamics and power dynamics that make that difficult, but you can still take it upon yourself to be a driver of clarity. So, I have a client who's a VP at an organization who was really struggling because his CEO was in a lot of confusion and threat, was really struggling to do all of this, basically abdicated on the big why and was just making a lot of what looked to be knee-jerk decisions in the face of, I don't know about this, I don't know about that, we just got to cut, we just got to da 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 da. And I said, listen, like, this is that time where you can actually step up as a trusted advisor, where you can take responsibility for creating clarity however you can. And he actually went and sat down with his CEO and with a couple other members of the C-suite and said, listen, like, for me to deliver on my department's goals, I need more clarity on these things. And there's actually a reality that I don't think that we're looking at right now about how much this crisis has changed the nature of our strategy. And I feel for you. Like, I have to imagine there is so much on your plate that I don't see. And from my perspective, I think we can be focused here. I think there's some resources here. I think there's some opportunities here. But I do at least want to get clear that, hey, this is a problem. We're facing something new. I want us to at least get out into the open how we're going to deal with it.
And my intention in asking that question and surfacing this is to be helpful. So, and hopefully that will be received well. Yeah. Another question, Jake. Are there absolute don't do's that you would recommend staying away from?
Absolute don't do's. Yeah, I mean, the opposite of all of those cultural principles. Let's see. So if problems equals opportunities, yeah, don't treat problems as unsolvable death spirals that have no solution and will crash your business no matter what you do. So I think, anytime where you're freaking out and you're like, I can't see a way out of this, and you feel like you just are going to vent to your team about how there's no way out, you should probably not do that. In terms of the compassion as advantage, like inverse of that, assuming that people are slackers and you need to control every single thing that they do and cracking down on them when they don't achieve their goals in the timelines you want. Like, I think that's a big no-no. And then on the transparency thing, like punishing people for bringing problems to you. There's a reasonably well-researched theory out there that one of the reasons Germans lost World War II was that all of Hitler's generals were terrified to bring him bad news. So he had no idea how the war was going. And if you're punishing people for bringing you bad news, you're not going to get it. And then you're going to be behind the problems when they actually crop up.
Right, right. And similar to, you've already mentioned it before, but where my brain goes first is not judging the different types of reactions people are having to this. So, that's where everyone is responding to their fear and their confusion and the threat that they're feeling differently. So resisting the urge to judge a reaction that doesn't make sense to you, because everyone is in threat,
Yes.
So resisting that. That's hard. But I think that's, one of the don'ts that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great one.
All right, here's a good one, Jake. How do you think about balancing the individual decisions to stay with your organization versus leave if you're experiencing that the organizational leadership or the why doesn't align with yours?
I love that question. You knew it, Jared. You knew I would love that one. So listen, this gets a little bit into deeper talentism philosophy that, our sort of axiomatic view of the universe is that we are in the business of unleashing human potential. And we believe that if you are not in your home, if you are not in a context that makes sense to you, or at least, doesn't put you in threat all the time, it's going to be very hard for you to explore and run the experiments you need to unleash your potential. So as a general bias, I think we index to, go find your home. Recognizing that we're in a deep recession and the future is unknown and there are bills to pay and income matters and all of that, and people are going to have real situations on the ground that you need to deal with. The one thing I would check is, how much of that is a threat response? How much of that is you going to that place, going back to that 3C model of confusion, clarity, and certainty? How much are you going to certainty about your leadership team and what they're doing? Is it actually true that they have no idea, they're totally, the why doesn't align with yours? Or is it that they're confused and in pain and don't know how to communicate it? And that's actually something that you could help them with.
This question came in anonymously, but whoever asked it, it relates to the webinar that we're working with one of our clients on thinking about your big four, thinking about, where is your home? So if that's a topic that you're interested in, there's something else coming down the line that I think would be helpful for you specifically. We have time for a few more questions if there are any else that anyone wants to type in. All right, so with that, Nick, if you could just go to the next slide, please.
There we go.
So I just want to thank everyone for your participation today. I hope that you found the time useful, and we will be recording the session and posting it on our website. If you have feedback or questions that we didn't get to or something that occurs to you after and you're like, what about this? Please go to info@talentism.com to ask your questions, and we'll be posting this on our YouTube page for Talentism as well. And with that, I wish you all well. Thank you for everything.
Stay safe, wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Zoom hugs. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Jake. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Sharon.